What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and we are finally back on track after a busy summer. And I've got some guests to start introducing back onto the podcast. So this week, I'm bringing a guest from across the pond in Jacksonville, Florida, Mr. Gino Barbaro. Now, Gino started his journey as a restaurant owner, but got into real estate investing and never looked back, essentially. So today, Gino is a life coach, and he has some excellent mental frameworks on investing, on business, and life in general. And so we're going to discuss a number of things. One of them in particular that I liked is the concept of money archetypes. And we all identify with these types of money archetypes, but I'm going to let Gino explain it in a little bit more detail. I think this is a great episode for just understanding the importance of values-based decision making when it comes to your business and your life and things like that. So what else can I say? Let's let Gino expand on all of these topics. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, my conversation with Gino Barbaro. Gino Barbaro, welcome to the podcast.
Gavin, thanks for having me on, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and we've just been having a conversation about your 2 trips to Ireland in the last while. And but you're not based in Ireland. You're based in, did you say Jacksonville, Florida?
St. Augustine, Florida, which is 30 minutes south. And Gavin, with a name like Gino, do you think I'd be based in Dublin? I don't think so. There may be 1 or 2 in Dublin, but I don't think there are that many Ginos in Ireland.
You're right. Yeah. That's definitely an Italian heritage there, yeah.
Yes.
So tell me, Gino, let's roll back the clock. You mentioned that you were from New York, I think, originally.
Yes.
So tell us about young Gino, you leaving school or university and getting started. What brought you into the real estate sector to begin with?
Well, it's very interesting to continue the vein of the stereotypical Italian immigrant. My parents both came from Italy. My father opened an Italian restaurant, can't make this up. And at the age of 8 years old, I'm going to work with Dad. And I had talked to you about money coaching, and at the age of 8, I had instilled early patterns with money and with saving and with hard work. At the age of 8, I remember my dad giving me $2 and saying, "Great job," in front of the whole family. Right then and there, I have the implants in my brain that hard work pays off, you feel good, you get the adulation, and Pops really respects that and loves you for that. And up until high school, college, went to college, worked every weekend, was a hard worker. Got out of college, worked in finance for a year down in Wall Street. I hated it, like you had said. I think you had a brother who did the grind. The grind was not for me. I ended up opening a restaurant with the family at the age of 23. And I'd worked in that venue for 15 years. I loved it. I loved working with my dad. I loved working with my mom, that small family feel of a restaurant. But unfortunately, my father passes away. Wow. And I say to myself, am I living his dream or am I living my dream? And that's when I picked up T. Harv Eker's book, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I read the book. I hated T. Harv for about 10 minutes. Then I reflected and I'm like, he's right. Your fruits are in your roots. I had shallow roots. That's why I had very few fruits. And the big word, the responsibility. I think Churchill said it. I forgot how he said it, but he said responsibility is the price you pay for greatness. And I was not responsible. I mean, I was to a fact, but not responsible in the fact that in '08, the Great Recession comes, and you talk about your pain. I'm making excuses for everything. Obama, the economy, Bush. Everyone was to blame except for me. And when I realized it was my fault, all of the talents that I had and all of the successes and the failures that I had up to that point were because of me. Once I realized that, I became responsible. I said, what's the next step? I've got 4 kids at this point. How am I going to pay for these 4 kids? How am I going to pay for college? And how am I going to pay to retire myself? And I saw real estate as the vehicle. My mom had owned a couple of real estate pieces of property. I had made a couple of really bad investments, Gavin. And I said, how do I do this? So I went to get some mentorships, learned about multifamily. I met my business partner, Jake, in 2011. We started buying real estate together. It took us 18 months to find the first deal. And I guess you could say the rest is history. But for anybody out there, let's go back to the young Gino. Let's go back to the patterns that I was creating. I was a saver, right? I was somebody who didn't want to take a lot of risk. I was somebody who valued hard work. Some of those patterns are really good. But some of those patterns really held me back. And I want people to listen, as they're listening to the podcast, reflect on what we call the money bio, what your pattern is, what your history is, and see those patterns play out today, and see how well you're doing in certain areas of your life, whether it's your family, whether it's your health, whether it's your business, and then look at other areas and see where those areas you can get better at.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because I've recognized it and it's funny, a couple of my own coaching clients that I mentor and stuff like that, anybody who got burned in the 2008 crash, they carry with them, and I would include myself in this, scars. Like,
yes,
there's undoubtedly a sense of scarcity that's kind of simmering just below the surface, because you went through a couple of, like in my case, I went through some really lean years where the bank pulled everything on me. And I ended up in a situation where I had to ask my brother to bail me out and to let me live rent free in one of his places. And I mean, it's humbling, first of all, but I recognize it in others when I speak to them and they're explaining what they've been through. And it's something similarly difficult and stuff. And and you can tell that they're kind of like they've lost their confidence in some cases and things like that. So tell us, how can you evaluate that kind of mindset, and how do you know whether you're being held back by your mindset?
That's a great question, Gavin, and I would classify that as a money trauma. That's a traumatic event, and I would classify that as go out and get therapy. Because therapy will help you. We were talking about my wife and I doing couples coaching a couple of years ago. I think the word therapy has gotten a bad rap. When you're in therapy, it's like you need help. Well, we all need help, because I can't go to my friend and ask for help because they're not detached. I want somebody who's compassionate, detached from it, but having compassion and being able to look at it. That's what I do when we create a money bio. You go back and you have memories of all of your patterns of money. Every one. I had when I was 5 years old. Grandma took me to the store. I wanted to buy toy soldiers. She didn't have money for me. We had to leave the store because she didn't have money. That left a lasting impression on myself. So going back, you go back to 2008 and you work with a client, and maybe they may need some therapy on that situation to talk about it, to heal from it. And that's what ends up happening. For me, it was sort of the reverse. I was sort of pissed. I was like moving away from pain. I was like, I need to figure this out because I don't want to let my family down. I have an amazing wife. She's homeschooled 6 kids. God has given me this amazing family, right? I don't want to be slothful. I don't want to commit sin, right? I want to try to do the best I possibly can. So I was done with the excuses at that point. I was making excuses and I was just completely fed up. What I found out is I had a great partner in Jake. I could lean on him. I had the accountability. My wife gave me the permission to say, Gino, here's our financial future. I trust you. To me, that was a huge burden. So I'm going to spend hours and hours on learning how to invest in real estate. I'm going to spend hours and hours on doing a deal. I'm going to work 70, 80 hours a week for the next 4 or 5 years to make sure that I don't squander that opportunity. So if you're listening to this, go back and look at the traumatic events, because what Gavin is saying is if you had that traumatic event and you lost money in a real estate deal, it's called an assumption in life coaching. It's one of those energy blocks that you're going to assume that you made a mistake. You're going to repeat that mistake. That's not how life works. You end up learning from that mistake. That problem in '08 for me became an opportunity because I saw the things that I made wrong. I saw that I gave a complete moron $172,000 to invest in a mobile home park that he didn't know what he was doing. So it was my mistake. It was his negligence and his fraud. But once I assumed that responsibility that I should have been a steward of that money and I should have understood real estate investing a little bit better, then I can start making decisions on how to proceed forward by saying, I really need to learn the business. Stop blaming everybody else. Start learning it. And then I think the last thing I'd say is just become crystal clear. See, we don't lack motivation. We lack the clarity. And if you're not clear on what you want, if you go out, Gavin, and ask somebody what they want, most people will tell you what they don't want. And that's the problem. They're focused on what they don't want. But let's focus on what you do want. I just wanted to have a small little portfolio that could provide enough cash flow for me monthly that I didn't have to worry about paying the bills, that I could build wealth slowly. And that's what led me to multifamily. And then within 5 years of my first deal with Jake, I had the opportunity to leave the restaurant for good. I did, and I focused on real estate. But knowing what I wanted was really important for me to become successful in real estate.
Clarity is everything, yeah. And what you're referring to there about just stop blaming everyone else, I think there's another term for it as well. It's just extreme ownership. And it's really just, everything falls back on your shoulders ultimately. Like, it's easy. I did that for a while in 2008. I remember when Lehman went down, and I was, suddenly the banks were pulling the plug on things. And I remember thinking, like, bloody hell, these damn banks are, and it was everyone except me. It was like, I went and overstretched, but I wasn't looking at me at all. I was thinking these banks, these greedy bankers, and then it was some other person that wasn't me. And ultimately, I can remember it took a year or two before I suddenly went, do you know what? You're just bullshitting yourself.
Yes.
This is on you, man.
When was that point for you? I'm sorry to cut you off, but when was that point that you said, Lehman Brothers, they don't really have anything to do with me. It's not even affecting my life whatsoever. Do you remember that point in your life?
Yeah, I remember it was the lowest of the low. And it was a point when I was back in Dublin and I was living rent-free in my brother's apartment. And I can remember meeting a friend of mine who I went to school with, and I went and I met him in a bar and we were having a drink, and he was saying, so how's it going? And I was explaining. Now, he was doing really, really well. He had a very high-powered job, and so he was buying, the drinks and everything like that. And I was explaining that, man, the school that you and I went to, I'll never be able to afford that school for my kids. Like, it is just beyond me, like, to even think about that, getting back to that level. I am so underwater here. And I can remember he rang me the next day and he said, are you okay? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you were in a pretty dark place last night. I didn't like to see you like that. And it was around about that time. I can't remember exactly the moment, but I can remember that was a point when I was kind of blaming everyone else. And it was a point where I suddenly said to myself, do you know what? That is the old me. It's time to start rebuilding from this point forward. And everything is on me. And the only person who can dig us out of this hole is me. And that was when it began,
It's interesting because we have something called money archetypes in money coaching. And one of the archetypes that you were exhibiting was the victim archetype. And what happens is it's a pattern. So you're telling you your own story of everyone else is to blame. And sometimes we like to sit in that. And sometimes, I would say most of the times, victims don't even know that they're telling them that. And they need a pattern interrupt, at least to be told. And sometimes it feels better to blame others. But at some point, some people just tend to snap out of it. You did in that situation. I did in '08. I was driving hand-me-down cars. I had 2 cars for my parents that I wasn't paying. I was able to skate by. But once you understand that, and everything starts to change. All of a sudden, the victim starts to take responsibility. And they start to say to themselves, what other archetypes can I exhibit? There's the fool, right? The person who's more of a gambler kind, right? There's the innocent who just wants to bury their head. There's the warrior, which is what you exhibit from the victim, right? The warrior is all of a sudden, I'm going to take control, I'm going to take action. But then there's a shadow archetype, which is called a tyrant, which is like, you know what? I am fearful of money. I'm going to control everything. And I have some tyrant tendencies with my wife. It comes from a place of fear, right? When you have 6 kids and you've got a lot of bills, you want to keep control of everything. You want to make sure, with the money that I'm making, really, do I have to yell at my kids for, using extra toilet paper? No, but that's the tyrant me saying that I can't waste money. And it's interesting, once you start diving into these different archetypes and the way the patterns that you've exhibited, you can just stop back and say to yourself, well, do I want to be that way? Do I need to be a victim? And how do I get out of it? That's the start to being able to, I don't want to say to change your life, just to transform your life. You only needed a couple tweaks, I think, in life to really transform what you have going on.
And so on that, using that exact archetype description there, so victim, fool, innocence.
There's 8 of them.
There's 8 of them. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's 8 archetypes.
Is there a best one, or is it to try to embody a certain amount of them all?
That's a great question. Go to the moneycoachinginstitute.com. I'm not getting paid for any of this, but Deborah Price runs it. She's been doing it for over 20 years. Since the year 2000. The highest archetype is the magician. The magician transcends reality. They're the ones who are your inner being, your inner spirit, who can say to the warrior, you're doing it all, but let's do it for the right reasons. Let's lead an enlightened life. I mean, I like the creator artist. The creator artist is out there who's making beautiful things. They're making art, but they have an inner conflict with money. They don't want to sell their art, or they don't want to live in the material world. So at one point, you're creating these beautiful pieces of art, but you have a real problem with money. You don't want to sell your art. So that's great, because sometimes we want to tap into our creator artist, how we're on this podcast, how we're just creating, writing books, But at the same time, if you're having a conflict with money, are you going to have impact in the world? Because really, how do you sell your art and how you get your voice out in the world? If you're afraid of that and subconsciously you're saying to yourself, money's not really good, well, you're going to hold yourself back subconsciously by not doing that. That's why these archetypes are really cool, how we live through ourselves. There's the innocent, there's the fool, the warrior, the magician. Like I said, there's 8 of them. But
creative artist, yeah.
Yeah, go to like I said, the moneycoachinginstitute.com. She's got a money quiz. So if you take the money quiz, it'll show you based on what archetype. So I was very high with warrior at this stage of my life. At warrior, I had some magician, but I needed to embody more of the magician because right now I am in a transition period of my life. I just sold my education company. I've got a great portfolio. Now I'm starting the Barbaro 360 company. So I'm sort of unsure. Where the next step is. So she's like, you've got a little creator artist. You have even a little fool, because my fool comes down to the point that I don't trust the stock market. I think the stock market is the biggest Ponzi scheme. So there's a little bit of fool, or I should say innocent as well. I don't really, so we all have pieces of them, but just by you understanding which one you embody, you really, I think, want to sort of gravitate a little bit more towards warrior, who takes responsibility, who takes charge, who's decisive, who's disciplined. But then the warrior is like the 2.0, where all of a sudden they see things clearly and they can really make these decisions based on what your sole purpose is, what your why is.
Interesting, yeah. And it's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking about the fool, and I've been that as well, where you squander money and things like that. And so I think people kind of go through these different periods in life when they're, there's like seasons or something like that.
Yes.
And if you don't recognize it, some of the guys, I think it ultimately boils down to an understanding of whether you're worth it or not.
Yes.
And
well,
some people just don't think that they are.
No, but the fool is great, though. The fool can be great because the fool takes chances. The fool sees every opportunity that there is out there. Bitcoin. They see what a great opportunity that is. Then they see AI now, so they jump on board. The problem with the fool is the fool doesn't really hang on and see it through because they're on to the next venture. So if you can have that fool tendency where you see the opportunity, but then you try to get your warrior into play and, hey, this is the one we're sticking with. This is the one that's decisive. And then the magician is like, well, should you be doing this? Is this part of what your DNA wants you to be? Is this where you're passionate? Is this what lights you up? If you can put all 3 of those together, man, then you're leading in a freaking empowered and really cool life.
So tell us a little bit about your portfolio. You mentioned you started in 2011. It took you 18 months. And in that 18 months, it took you to find just your first deal.
Yes.
But I know from speaking before we hit record that you've built up a big enough portfolio now, you and your partner, Jake. So tell us, how did you scale that? Like from that first property to where you are today, tell us about the learnings in that process.
Sure. Well, I always like to say that I have life before Jake in investing and life after Jake. Life before Jake was, for lack of a better word, I don't know, Irish people like to curse a little bit. It was a shit show. Like, really, I bought one good deal. I had a couple disasters. And I'm like, why can I not figure this out? Real estate, for anybody listening, is not rocket science. It's not like you're building a spaceship and sending it up to the moon. It really isn't. But I couldn't figure it out. And then when I met Jake and I'd gone through the mentorships and I understood that, hey, we created the 3-step framework: buy right, finance right, and manage right. To us, it was a 3-legged stool. It was in the shape of a wheelbarrow. And let me explain. The back legs are fixed. You need to buy an asset properly and you need to finance it properly. Well, I never bought my asset properly and the financing sucked. So what happens? The wheelbarrow tips over. Great, you have a bad investment. But if you do both of those well, and that's what people have done over the last couple of years, they thought they bought it right and financed it right. Those are sexy. Nobody wants to talk about real estate, what it really is. It's a business. It has operations. The wheel of the wheelbarrow is managed right. It's in constant motion. And if you're not managing it or operating it, that's fine, but you need somebody to manage it. And that's what's been going on over the last couple of years, where people just thought of it as, hey, I'm going to buy this asset, fix it, flip it, and move on to the next one. Well, when the music stopped playing, all of a sudden you own this asset and you don't know how to operate it. So for us, it comes down to that. Now, if we look at what Jake and I did, he was a pharmaceutical rep, taking food out of the restaurant, bringing it to doctor's offices. He got sick and tired of that. So if anybody's saying, well, I can't do this, he was a W-2 employee that never owned anything, and we just got together. I understood a little bit about real estate. So our first deal was a 25 unit. It was a weekly renter. It actually had the Shamrock Motel on the property. It was a 6-unit efficiency. Can't even make that up. That's think about the irony of ironies. But we bought that property, and it was one of those things where Think big, start small. I mean, all the gurus out there are telling you to go as big as possible. That's not how life works. If you're just starting out and you can afford a duplex, buy the duplex, because then all of a sudden you can say to yourself, I've done a deal. I am a real estate investor. I can identify as one. The brokers are going to call me. All of a sudden, Aunt Margie knows that I own a duplex. Maybe she might want to invest in my next deal. So that's what happened with us. We bought a 25 unit. I helped from afar. I was living in New York. We bought the property in Knoxville, Tennessee, where Jake was boots on the ground. 3 months after that, we bought a 36 unit property. And all of a sudden, wow, we've got 60 units within 2 years of partnering up. That's a lot of units. Within 4 years, we have 500 units. And I think the one big difference between the real estate and the restaurant, because with the restaurant, I owned the restaurant for over 20 years. I had one location. And within 4 years of partnering with Jake, we own 500 units. I mean, it doesn't make sense logically. I think two things really made a big difference. Number one, I was more amenable to partnering up and saying, yes, I need help. Because I had a business partner named Mike who had a strong balance sheet, and I had Jake was boots on the ground, and I trusted him, and we worked really well together. But I think the second thing was, all of a sudden, I looked at it as a business, and we created something called our cadence of accountability and our core values. At the restaurant, I didn't have core values. I didn't know what they were. I didn't have a mission statement. I was just trying to make money. I started the restaurant business to provide for my family. That's not what you should be doing when you're starting a business. You start a business to provide for your customer or your consumer or whoever's going to consume the product. I was doing the opposite, which is what most of us do when we start a business. It's about us. And once I realized that wasn't the case, I'm like, I have residents. We have 500 families that are renting all of a sudden our apartments. We have employees all of a sudden now. And at one point, we started investing and syndicating. We had investors. And once you start looking at it that way, and you need to start putting systems into play, because it's not just Jake and Gino anymore. It's the company itself, having the core values, having the weekly touch points, and all the meetings, and all that stuff. I think that is what allowed us to start scaling. But I think one of the best pieces of advice that I could give anybody listening to this is do not outgrow your infrastructure. Don't worry if Gavin's got 7,000 units and he just closed another 150 units. That's okay. That's Gavin's journey. That's what Gavin wants. You have to figure out why you're here, what God wants you to do, and figure out that not to outgrow the infrastructure. Because once you start doing that and you start over-levering, or you start buying too many deals and you can't hire employees, and you start taking on inordinate amounts of risk, and you're not built for it, you need to have the foundation for that before you start going up. So I think that's something that I would say to anybody. Before you start scaling, number one, why are you scaling? And number two, are you ready to scale?
Yeah, very important, all right, because I can recognize that exactly. I started to scale for all the wrong reasons. When I was scaling because it just seemed like the logical next step, that I want to be this big guy with this big, kind of impressive team and stuff. It wasn't the right reason at all. And actually, it was only when it all came crashing down that it was nearly a relief. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't like having a big team of people that are, expecting me to answer to them all the time and things like that. I prefer a small team, and it's realizing that about yourself and doing that deep introspection so that you actually are trying to build something that you ultimately want to have, not something that you want other people to see that you have.
Yes. That's such wise advice. That's something like, if you do the money bio, and I realized that myself, all I wanted was, I wanted a company that felt like a family. I wanted a company where my employees would come into work excited. Like, that's something that I sort of lacked at the restaurant. I had it early on, but I lost it. And if you go back into that, well, if I'm building a company and I'm just trying to buy deals and buy deals and buy deals and not really know who's working for the company and not really affecting the company, is that what I truly want? I may become so successful in other people's eyes, but does that make me feel successful? Is that success in my eyes? And that's one of the hard things about the internet and about going on Instagram and seeing everyone else's success. Read the book Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. It's a phenomenal book. It talks about these small companies that have created these cultures within their organizations. They've really impacted their community, they've impacted their employees, and they've also made a lot of money in the process. So you can make a lot of money in this process by doing it. And I would say, don't scale just because the Cody Sanchez is telling you to scale online or somebody else. That's great for her. That may not be right for you. That's all I'm saying. And hey, on the flip side, you may be born, you may be the next Elon Musk and say, dude, I'm dying. I'm bored here. That's another pattern, Gavin.
It's recognized. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think just understanding that is important. Yes.
Interesting. And tell us this, when we were speaking about, I think before we went online, you were talking about dopamine and deal addiction and things like that. And that's something that I recognize that in myself, is that literally in 2005 and 6, if anybody came to me with a deal, I was, yep, let's go for it. And I had done away with due diligence. It was now gut instinct and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, pay the price ultimately. But you were saying something about dopamine, that it's a dopamine addiction, and that we have to recognize that this is not your behavior, it's dopamine.
It's interesting because you're exhibiting the fool. The fool has that kind of behavior where everything's an opportunity, and you didn't have the framework: buy right, manage right, finance right. That's why I think for me having a partner was incredible, because I may think the deal is good, but I can go to my business partner and ask him and say, hey, honestly, what do you think about this deal? And he could tell me, hey, I don't think it's a good deal or a bad deal. Now, unfortunately for Jake and myself, we both love doing deals, so that can put us at risk. But we're very fortunate back in 21 and 22, we didn't fall into that trap because I had already gone through the pain of what you were describing in 08. I had already done a couple of bad deals, and I swore on myself that I would never do a bad deal. I did not want to have get-theritis. And what ends up happening with dopamine is you've got a deal, and that dopamine, that adrenaline that you feel, that rush that you feel, it makes you feel good thinking about doing the deal or eating that piece of cake or buying that thing online on Amazon. But once that is done and that action is over, you've got to get on another dopamine high. And that's why you kept saying, I got to keep fueling it. I got to keep fueling it. So just be aware, that's another pattern. One of my patterns early on that I developed, that I just realized it a couple months ago, was that I love to stay busy. I love to be active. I love to be creating. I love to be doing deals. That's my pattern. And now that I've slowed down for the last couple of months and trying to figure out my next steps, I get anxious. I get uneasy. I get nervous. And realizing that's why it's coming from that pattern, I can at least do something called polyvagal breathing, where I can relax and I can understand what's going on and not make a stupid decision. Not buy a company or not buy a car, because it's not about the car or the company. It's about what's going on within myself.
Yeah, it's just recognizing that and getting that clarity that I think a lot of people don't realize the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your book, Happy Money, Gino.
I interviewed a gentleman named Ken Honda about a year ago, and he is the financial guru in Japan. He wrote a book called Happy Money years ago. He's probably sold over 20 million copies. Incredible. And he said, you should write a book in his Japanese accent. Happy money, happy properties, happy family. And I'm like, I don't want to write a book on real estate. I've already written 3 books. I'm like, I want to write one on happy money, happy family, and happy legacy. And to me, when people read it, they may say, well, money doesn't make you happy. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, and what I think Ken is saying, that you want to be able to attract happy money in your life. And what does happy money look like? I can start out by saying what unhappy money looks like. That's Gino at the restaurant in 2011, having to go to work, having to pay the bills, having to feel like it's a soul-sucking existence, having to go against what my passions are. That's unhappy money. I needed to do that. Happy money is, wow, I can step out and focus on what I really enjoy. Enjoy creating podcasts, enjoy writing books, enjoy doing deals. I want to have more happy money coming into my life. It's just like positive flowing energy. And then from that, I want to translate that into helping me create a happy family with that. And then ultimately, what does the happy legacy look like? I want to teach my children to become financial stewards, but also pass on the values that we've created throughout our lifetimes to our children and to our grandchildren. Because I think, the quote that I love about legacy is like a gardener who's planting a seed. And that gardener may never see that seed grow, but you know it's there, and you know that you planted it, and you know that you've affected the next couple of generations. That's what legacy looks like. So I want people to start focusing on creating more happy money. That, I think, will ultimately lead to a happier family. And then ultimately, what does a happy legacy look like for you?
Interesting. Yeah. And tell me this, Gina, you have a couple of your kids working in the business with you now. What's that like?
It's incredible. I mean, one of my daughters, my oldest daughter, she's going to be 26 next month. She's a missionary, actually. She went back into the mountains of Georgia for the summer, working on what she loves. Now, the old Gino would have said, you can't be a missionary. You're not going to make any money. How are you going to support yourself? The new Gino is like, well, you know what, Gabs? You love that, and you're affecting thousands of children every summer that are coming to this camp, and you love working with our organization. It doesn't matter how much money you make. You're making an impact. That's what happy money looks like. When she comes back, she'll just jump right back into the company. My son is 23 years old. We're starting an Amazon store. I've never done that before. The old Gino would have been like, no. The new Gino, a little bit of fool in him, is like, let's try this. A lot of people have made money with Amazon stores. And my 19-year-old daughter, she's a massage therapist. She's going to get into the wellness aspect aspect of it. It's really a family company, and the whole mission with the company is changing the world one family at a time. That's what we want to focus on, one family at a time, through communication with spouses, through the money talk, through teaching people about money, but also having faith and family imbued within that message.
So you're kind of moving away from real estate into kind of life coaching, it seems.
Yeah. And then the fact is, people know me as the real estate guy, and I'll always talk about business, and I love strategy and all that. But I know underlying, I can teach anybody all the strategy that you need. But if you don't fix the underlying symptoms, whether you know it's a 5 cap or a 6 cap, it doesn't make a difference, because I always hear people say, I can't pull the trigger, or I don't know what's going on. And it's not the lack of knowledge, it's the ability to say what's going on inside, and let's work on what's going on inside first. Let's fix that. Then once you have that fixed, let me teach you all about this world of business and world of real estate, so then you don't have to make excuses about not being able to pick up a phone and call a real estate broker because you don't know why. You just don't feel like you should, or you don't feel worthy of it. That to me is more important. I can teach both, but what's more exciting to me now is understanding that there's so much untapped potential that we can focus on, and I think that's where we'd love to focus on.
Well, it's true. I'm very much of the view that business is 20% tactics and strategy, and then 80% psychology and just understanding the mindset of it. Like I've seen over the years, just different people. One of the things that I have developed, my own kind of concept, is the gambler analyst spectrum. And on both sides of the spectrum, you got the gambler and you got the analyst. And if you're a gambler, it's a bit like the fool. You're going to end up blowing all your money on stuff. But if you're the analyst, you will never take action. You'll always be, let's do another study before we go ahead and push the button. And the gambler will have bought the property before you ever had a chance,
Yes.
It's understanding which of those are you, and then trying to kind of bring yourself closer to the middle.
Yes.
And that's why, I guess that's one of the reasons why sometimes partnerships work, because there's maybe a little bit of you both, and you find a happy medium,
You've said it really well, and it's interesting because it's paralysis analysis. Why does that person have paralysis analysis? Well, like you said, something must have happened in their bio where their parents lost their house, or their parents went into foreclosure, their parents did a bad deal, and it left a scar, that trauma as a young person, having to go through that. Well, as an adult, you see an opportunity, but you're hesitant because all of a sudden you're remembering unconsciously what happened years ago. Let's unlock that, because once you unlock that and you let that go, and you can heal from that, and then you can start making decisions consciously, and everything changes in life.
Yeah, really interesting. So, Gino, tell us, what has you excited at the moment in terms of, what projects are you working on, or what fires you up in the morning?
I mean, right now it's just money coaching. I'm getting my certification in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and I love talking about money in just a real way. And I think, for me, I love the financial aspect of it, because honestly, financial planning is rather simple. It's simple math. It's 1 + 1 is 2. And when you realize that most people look at money in a skewed way, and if I can help them uncover what their limiting beliefs are, what their patterns are, and I can affect that one family, well, that one family is going to affect multiple families. That's what really has got me lit up in the morning, to say, how do I create more content based on that? And how do I help teach people to look at money as something that's an inanimate object, really? And like we had said offline, money is just a result. That's really all it is. If you realize it's just a result and it's just a tool, and you're not working for money, you're working to create a result, and you're looking to create value. Once you can shift paradigms, things start changing for people.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny. I have these, I think about my values. We were talking about values earlier. And I think about my values as the 5 Fs. And my fitness, my family, my finances, my freedom, and then I refer to my burning passions and the things I like to do, like making content and stuff, as my flame. And when I think about those things, and I often sit down and I journal around this time of the month. tomorrow's the 1st of the month, so I'll put aside some time and I'll think about all this. But I think to myself that, if you want to have the time for fitness, and if you want to have the time to spend time with your family and all that kind of stuff, then the finances kind of unlock that. Because if you're tied to a desk or something like that, so it's not that the money situation is what you're doing it for, it's the unlock that it provides.
Yes. I love that. I love the fact that you journal, and I think more people should do that. And what you're doing is the coaching is a 4-core process. At the end of it, ultimately, what you're trying to accomplish is trying to uncover the patterns and trying to also see what you enjoy, what lights you up. Doing more of that and doing less of what you hate to do. And most people don't do that. Listen, I didn't do that years ago. And now once I understood that I love to podcast, I love to public speak, I love to create content, I love to coach, those are things that I should be spending more time on, because if I get better at it and I'm also more lit up during the day, I show up better, and then I will attract more happy money. It's really not hard to understand, but if you've never been taught that or never been going down that road, it's wow. Instead of being in a job that you hate for 40 hours and coming home and not doing anything and just living that's what they call the rat race, the hamster wheel that you're on, and you don't get off of that. It's really interesting. I love what you do. You have a reset. You make sure that you're on your plans. You make sure you have your goals. And one last thing I'll say, you had the word values. It's values-based decision-making, as one of my mentors said. Every decision should be based upon your values, whatever you value in life. And that's another exercise people should do. Write down your values, what values you're living towards. Some of you may be valuing freedom, adventure, excitement. Well, are you doing things? Are you making decisions based on that? Even for investing, my values in investing are not excitement. I want to have a boring investment. Multifamily is boring, and I want to have one that's actually long-term, generational building. So I'm not going to be putting the bulk of my portfolio in crypto. It's just, it goes against what I value. So understanding that is so important. So value, do the journaling, and also think about what the values are and make every decision based upon your values.
Yeah, and my own performance coach, who I've been working with for a couple of years, he's very much of the view that if you're living a life that's not in alignment with your values, then there's always suffering, you know?
Yes.
And a lot of the time you don't even recognize it.
Yes.
People they're chasing this goal that they don't even realize is not aligned with their goals,
yes,
with their values. And I've seen, there's the age-old story of the kid whose parents wanted to become a doctor, and he goes off and he does his 10 years of, university and work and everything like that, gets the piece of paper, here mom, here dad, now I'm going off to join a band or something like that, like, 'cause that's what they want to do.
He could have saved himself 10 years and not gone, right? That's the incredible part. But, when you're stuck in it, and this is a word for parents. We want to live through our children, and we want to think that, what we say is great for them. But if you can just get them to the point of adulthood where they can make their own great decisions, and you're there to support them, and your goal as a parent is to make them want to become happy in whatever they want to do. I know it's challenging, I know it's hard, but that should be one of the goals. One of the goals should be, I don't want you to become a doctor. The goal should be, I want you to do whatever lights your ass up in the morning, whatever you want to do to jump out of bed. And that's becoming a missionary and going out and helping people. Great. Be the best missionary that you can be. That's what I think we should, this should be the message for parents.
Yeah, no, totally. It's self-actualization, basically helping them to achieve that. Gino, I'm conscious of time. So, if people wanted to learn more about you and your business, your new business and stuff like that, like where's the best place to find you?
There's two places. They can go to jakeandgino.com. That's the real estate stuff. It's got multifamily. It's got our podcasts on there. If they want to learn more about the family stuff, it's my last name. It's Barbaro360.com. Barbaro360.com. I've got the Happy Money book down there as a free download. I do a podcast with my wife, the Julie and Gino Show. So we have that. I've got a podcast with my son, who's 23 years old. We have the Happy Money podcast. So you have actually, it's pretty funny because you have an older dude and a young guy, and our perspectives on money, and it's pretty interesting to see like the difference, the way the difference in the generations, how I was raised with money, and how he's got a different outlook on it than I do. It's pretty cool.
I would imagine is your son investing in crypto and things like that?
It's actually annoying because my son at the age of 15 invested in one of our deals, and now at the age of 23 he's got a 7-figure net worth. He's got several $1,000s a month coming in cash flow. Yeah, because he understood that let's keep rolling the money into the deals. He understood that instant gratification was like, you know what? And now at the point, he's very savvy. He's very intelligent with money. And he knows that money's not making him happy because it'll be funny. We'll do a refinance. All of a sudden, he's got a big chunk of money. He's like, I'm going to go buy something. I'm like, Mike, I got a deal. Okay, I can hold off on buying something. I'll put the money in the deal because I know the deal will make me money in the long run. So it's just trying to train your kids to be aware and to understand that instant gratification has killed many fortunes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny. I heard somebody say that the problem with instant gratification, and for most kids, it doesn't happen fast enough. They just, it's like everyone's so used to being on the phone. And it's funny, I'm hearing a lot
Yes.
of entrepreneurs and people identifying with being ADHD now. I'm seeing it kind of everywhere I look, and it is interesting to think. I think it must be tied to the smartphone and the fact that everyone's got one.
I just think that's an excuse. I think, listen, it's dopamine driven. Once again, you get on the phone, you feel great, you get the likes, and I get that. For me and for the kids, and your frontal lobe's not developed until you're 25 years of age. So kids are already challenged to begin with. So they're already emotion driven, and they can't make logical decisions until their brain is not even fully formed. And most adults have the same thing on instant gratification. It's too easy. My generation, it was a lot harder to do things, and it was great. Now, if you want to buy something, it's very simple to do that. There's no barrier. And if you're not teaching your kids, hey, you know what, this is how you should look at stuff, it can be challenging for them. It can be really hard for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you even just look back on when I was starting out in business back in the 1990s, we'll say, I can remember to get a phone line into your office. Like, I would rent an office, you had to go and sign a lease and all that, but then you had to go and order a phone line, and it would take 6 to 8 weeks for this phone line to be delivered. And nowadays, like, it's just instantaneous.
Everything.
It's incredible.
You can fit a studio here in a matter of 2 days. You can have lights, you can have a computer, you can have a mixer, you can have a TV, you can have a mic within literally 48 hours. This would have taken you months, years ago. So it's actually interesting. I mean, it's gotten better, but you just got to be aware of the habits of, are you spending too much? Do you need it? And it's interesting.
Well, what's funny is that the mind is an old gland or muscle or organ or whatever you want to call it, but the mind has been around for like 2 million years. And yet all of this technology is literally maybe 15 years old. And so we are trying to adapt to something that is so new with a mind that has been developed over 2 million years.
Yes, that's a great point.
It is moving so fast, and now with AI and all that kind of stuff, it is interesting to see where it's going,
I personally think that we have an advantage because we didn't really grow up on it as far as being dependent upon it, but we have used it. Like the baby boomers are sort of out of it. They really missed it. And I think the young generation, this is all they know. We've had a taste of both. So we know how powerful it can be, and we know the utility of it, how useful it is, but we don't want to rely on it the whole thing, because we still want to have that human connection. We still want to have emotional intelligence. We still want to have connectivity, but we can use AI to help us out. So I think if we use it properly, our generation of Gen X, I think we can have an advantage if we can look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's keeping an open mind towards it, I guess, because a lot of people, I can remember in the day when my father would sort of say, here, Gavin, go and, put on a video there. I don't know how the VCR works or whatever, you know what I mean? And it was like, it's like, let the young people figure all that stuff out,
Yes. Yeah.
Gino, my final question for you, I ask this of all my guests is, knowing now what you know, a man with a family of 6 kids and everything like that, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Have more kids?
Nice and early. Start.
Yeah, I got married at 20 years of age. I mean, my wife was 23, and I was always afraid. I was always fearful of not having enough. That's how I was programmed. And every time we got pregnant, I always had the dread of, wow, are we going to be able to afford this kid?
Yeah.
And it's a horrible feeling. And I wish I would have said to myself, just trust in God. You'll figure it out. And it's okay if you can't afford all the beautiful things in life. Having a big family and having a lot of kids, it is the best thing that you could possibly have, because they're your legacy. And I've never heard anyone say, I want to have less kids. I've always heard people say, I want to have more kids. So if you're out there and you're contemplating and saying, well, I don't know if I can afford it, I can't afford it, listen, you'll figure out a way to be able to afford it.
You always figure it out. I can say that now on my with 5 kids in the world, and I can remember going through that same emotion, like, whoa, how are we going to afford number 4? How are we going to afford number 5? And then suddenly it's just, and now my wife is at me about number 6. So anyway, we'll see. I better not let her hear this this conversation. I'll cut it off. Anyway, Gino, it's been a wonderful conversation. Really enjoyed catching up with you, and I wish you every success. And the next time you're over in Ireland, we'll have to meet up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gavin, for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Gino. We are back doing some of these guest interviews, and I hope you find that one useful. I have plenty more saved up and ready to start showing you. But if there's anything that you'd like me to cover on a future episode, just send me a message and I'll be happy to go into those particular topics. There's quite a lot of news at the moment in the property market and just generally in the economy. So please do jot down any questions you have and I'll be happy to create an episode based on that. One quick reminder is we have our October event coming up. The 4th of October is our event. I have a conference room in a hotel booked here in Dublin. And if you would like to attend that, it is a members only event, but membership is now open. And so we have the October intake receiving memberships. So I've been doing a couple of calls with people during the week, talking to them, making sure they're a good fit. And a number of people are joining. And so if you think you would like to be a part of that intake, please do reach out and I'll be happy to have a chat with you and get you in the program and meet you on the 4th of October. With that said, I shall leave you go and have a great week and I'll speak to you same time next week.